shall send to the moon a giant rocket.
Hi, David Mould here. Welcome back to our series, Finding America in Bible Prophecy. For the past several episodes, we've been studying this fourth beast of Daniel 7 and the little horn that appears in his head. Why are we doing this? Because there's a verse in the Apocalypse where the United States is just one verse removed from this little horn power. If we can identify this little horn power correctly, then it should shed enormous light on what the Bible is trying to tell us about what's coming to America in our day. You sense America unraveling before your eyes? Well, you're not alone. Millions sense it and want to know what is coming. God willing, before our series is over, we'll tell you precisely what is coming. That's why we've spent the last several hours going meticulously through the identifying marks of this little horn. In giving us 8 of these identifying marks, it's as though God is saying, I'm being so precise here because I don't want you to miss it. I, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I absolutely want you to know who this little horn is. I don't want you to say in the end, I didn't know, or this is all just coincidence, or this little horn could mean this, or it could mean that. No, God has given us 8 of these marks, not 7 or 6 or 5 or 4 or 3 or 2 or 1, but 8. He wants us to know what's coming and who this power is. He wants us to be able to identify it beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now, what I'm about to share with you may not be the best example of what I really want to say, but it's close enough. The reason I've chosen this example is because something similar happened to me when I was a teenager over 55 years ago. I was into horse racing then and dreamt I was at Jamaica's horse racing venue, Caymanas Park, where I saw a black horse winning a race in a manner that was truly amazing. I dreamt it. Coming down the home stretch, it was weaving its way between horses as it sped toward the finish line and won. The jockey's name was Arthur Jones. I'll remember that dream until the day I die because it happened just as I saw it a few days later. So did I win a lot of money? No, I didn't. Because, mockery of mockeries, I'd already spent every penny I had on every black horse I could find. When the 5th race came, this 17-year-old boy, me, David Mould, was broke and kicking himself. For there in this race was the blackest horse at Caymanas Park, the Duke, who, while weaving through traffic, would go on to win just as I'd seen him do in my dream. With that as a backdrop now, let's take off. What is God doing in giving us 8 identifying marks for the little horn? Let me explain it to you this way. Let's say that, like me, you're dreaming. In your dream, you're at Churchill Downs, home of the Kentucky Derby. And you're there because earlier in the week you had a dream that a certain horse would win, and its jockey would be wearing a red shirt. If that had been the only identifying mark, then that's all you'd look for, like I did. All I was looking for was a black horse. In your case, every red-shirted jockey would be a candidate, wouldn't he? Or she? Because in your dream, that's all you were able to make out, that the jockey was wearing a red shirt. But there could be 100 jockeys out there with red shirts on, so you still wouldn't know who to pick. But if there was a second identifying mark, say like this jockey would be wearing a polka-dotted cap, then that makes life a little easier for you, doesn't it? Now all you have to look for is a horse whose jockey is wearing a red shirt and a polka-dotted cap. But even if that eliminated 10 horses, you'd still have 90 to choose from. Now how would you know who to pick? Now if there was a third mark, say this jockey would have white trousers on, then that narrows the field down even more. Let's say by this time you're down to 80 horses out there, all of whose jockeys have on red shirts, polka-dotted caps, and white trousers. But if in your dream you were given a fourth mark, say like this jockey's whip would be made out of bamboo, not leather, then you'd go out there and look for a jockey with a red shirt, polka-dotted cap, white trousers, and bamboo whip, wouldn't you? That might bring you down to 50 horses, but you still wouldn't know who to pick. It could be any of them. Now, if you saw a fifth sign that the horse the jockey was riding had its mane, that's the hair on its neck, cut down to an inch, only an inch, then you'd have a better idea who to pick, of course. And if you saw a sixth sign that the horse would have blinders on, then you could narrow your field down even more. By now you're down to 20 horses, let's say. That's a far cry from 100. But you still wouldn't know who to pick, would you? It could be any of the 20. Now, if you were able to make out the seventh identifying mark and you saw that the horse would be a jet black horse like mine was in my dream, then that might bring you down to 10. 10 horses to choose from. You'd have come up very far away from 100, but there still would be an element of uncertainty, wouldn't there? Now, if in your dream you were given an eighth sign and you saw that the jockey had only one good eye, like Red Pollard, Seabiscuit's favorite jockey, had, and would be wearing a purple eye patch, and there was only one horse out of the 10 whose jockey was wearing a purple eye patch, then you'd know. By this time there'd only be one horse standing. Its jockey would have on a red shirt, polka-dotted cap, white trousers, bamboo whip. The hair on the horse's neck, its mane, would be cut down to an inch. The horse would have blinders on, it would be jet black, and the jockey would be wearing a purple eye patch. What kind of dream would you call that? It would be a very specific dream, wouldn't it? A dream with a purpose. In effect, you'd have been handed the winner on a platter. Put another way, you'd have to be blind, willfully blind, not to spot the correct horse and jockey. The identity of the winner would have been made so plain to you that you could lay your life on the fact that you had picked the right one. Well, that's what God has done in giving us 8 identifying marks for this little horn of Daniel 7:24 and 25. Clearly, in giving us so many identifying marks, He didn't want mankind to have to guess as to the identity of this little horn. Do you hear me? I said He didn't want you to have to guess. He wanted there to be no mistake. That's why He gave us 8 identifying marks, so that we would make no mistake as to whom He was identifying. Sad to say though, while millions of eyes now see, while millions of eyes are being opened right now through this series, in spite of this, I know there'll be some who will be unwilling to accept what the Bible is revealing. Even now, at this point in our study, there are some of you who will refuse to accept what God, through Daniel, is teaching you. In fact, right now, I think it's safe to say that the only persons who can't identify this little horn are those who don't want to identify it for whatever reason. Some might have a deep emotional attachment to this horn, formed over 40, 50, 60, or 70 years of friendship, and just don't want to let it go. That's quite understandable, actually. For we saw pretty much the same thing in the Garden of Eden when Eve made the mistake of parleying with the serpent. She might not have known who the serpent was, but Adam knew. For the Bible tells us, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression. 1 Timothy 2:14. Now, in spite of the fact that Adam knew that the fruit would destroy him, listen to what the Bible says. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. Genesis 3:6. He did eat. Adam ate the thing, even though he knew it would destroy him. Why? Evidently because of the love he had for his wife. Now, I'm just the preacher here, but it seems to me most plausible that Adam didn't want to live without Eve and sacrificed himself upon the altar of his love. This was the only woman he knew, and he loved her. As he said in Genesis 2:23, she was bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh, and he loved her. So with some of you listening today to this message, you don't need any more proof. You don't need any more convincing. We've only gone through 5 of these 8 identifying marks, and you're already convinced. You know that what we've shown you thus far, even before you come to the sixth sign, which is that the little horn power would wear out the saints of the Most High, you already know, deep, deep in your soul, that every word you have heard today is true. You know who the little horn is. You see the decision ahead of you, and you're reluctant to budge. So powerful is the hold of this little horn upon you that you're actually reluctant to budge. Your parents and grandparents and parents before them all venerated this little horn, and you're reluctant to budge. Long before we come to the end of the story, long before we look at the other identifying marks, while others are fleeing, you are reluctant to budge. Why? Because this church is as verily bone of your bone and flesh of your flesh as was Eve to Adam. You don't want to let her go. Yet if you stay with her the way Adam stayed with Eve, you know you'll be throwing away everlasting life. You would have lived your life in vain, gone to the schools of the little horn, confessed in her confessionals and worshipped at her altars in vain. In effect, you'll be telling God, contrary to everything I profess, I really don't love you. I love the little horn. I really don't want to live with you and Jesus throughout the ceaseless ages of eternity. I don't want to be able to travel to Jupiter and Mars on my own. I don't want to be able to fly to far-off galaxies hundreds of millions of light years away and see the marvels of the universe for myself. I don't want to visit inhabited worlds to meet and fellowship with those who have watched this drama play out on this earth. I'd rather stay with this little horn power that authored Unum Sanctum and Iesus Domino. This power that would exalt Mary to the office of co-mediatrix, this little horn power that foisted upon the world the system we call auricular confession and destroyed millions. I would rather burn with her in the lake of fire than live eternally with my Savior. My friend, that is some love. That's quite a choice actually, and you have the freedom today to make it. God will give you proof, as He has done throughout the series, proof sufficient to identify this little horn, but He will never force your conscience. You've got to choose for yourself. How does Paul put it? Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of His good pleasure. Philippians 2:12 and 13. All right, this has been a rather lengthy preamble, but I felt impressed to state these things now before moving on to our sixth sign. He shall wear out the saints of the Most High. Daniel 7:25. That's our sixth identifying mark. Well, why have I stated things in such stark terms now, even before coming face to face with America in the Bible? I've done it because I might never live to finish this series. I don't know what the future holds, so let me make my initial altar call now. Now, while I have life and while you have life, while we can both make decisions for eternity. All right, so back to our sixth sign. The sixth of the eight, He shall wear out the saints of the Most High. Where do we start? Well, the truth is, we've started already, for that's what Unum Sanctum is. The codification of a principle that Pope in and Pope out for over 1,000 years would launch millions of men to take up arms and to wipe off the face of the earth men, women, and children whom the Roman Catholic Church termed heretics.